Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming with you my very ambitious May TBR. So during the month of May there are actually 3 readathons that I'm going to be participating in. Originally it was just the one because it's the same one I participate in every May, and then 2 more got added to the list. So it's going to be an interesting month, but I think I've made it work in terms of prompts and not overloading myself. A few of these books are going to work for multiple readathons because the first readathon is month-long, the second is the last 2 weeks of the month, and the last one is just the last week of the month, so I've overlapped a little bit to try and give myself some realistic expectations here. But without further ado, I will start and let you know what I'm going to be reading during the month of May. So the first book that I'm going to be reading is actually for my book club that I participate in. This is a anti-racist reading book club. This book club has been an anti-racist reading book club for the past year, and since the beginning of 2021, we have been pairing up a fiction with a non-fiction, alternating throughout the months. Going forward, it's kind of going to be a all-around social activism kind of book club. So it's been super fun so far. The conversations and the discussions we've had have been super enjoyable. But the book that we're going to be reading for the month of May for this book club is Talking to My Country by Stan Grant. This is a Indigenous Australian memoir and social justice book, nonfiction, that I am super excited to read. Yeah, it's going to be really great. I have it on order, so I don't have it physically to show you right now, but it is coming and I am excited to dig into it. I'm probably going to read it first, and then make sure I annotate it so I don't forget what my thoughts were before the end of the month's actual discussion about the book. But anyway, next up I'm going to be reading The House of Salt and Sorrow by Erin A. Craig. This is a YA fantasy retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, which I am super excited to read. I've had it since I got it in my owl crate back in August of 2019, so it's been on my list for a long time. The reason I'm going to be reading this during the month of May is because I am also participating in Buzzwordathon for the year of 2021, hosted by Books and Lala, and the May prompt is to read a book with house or home in the title, so that's what this one's going to be. Also, I'm going to try and read it in the first week of May. Next up, the first readathon that I'm going to be participating in during the month of May is the Asian Readathon hosted by Read with Cindy. I've participated in this readathon the last 2 years, so this will be my 3rd year running, and it's one of my favorite readathons I've ever participated in. Cindy does such a good job of organizing this readathon. She always creates a massive Google Doc. This time she's created a storygraph challenge as well. And she makes it super accessible for everybody to find books by Asian authors of many different demographics, and she also makes it a challenge to try and read from different authors of different ethnicities within the overall umbrella of an Asian writer. I'm super excited about this, and I've got 5 books on this list, 1 for each prompt. And without further ado, these are the books I'm going to be reading for Asian Readathon. The first book I'm going to be reading is Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. This is another YA fantasy, but this one is described as like a fantasy K-drama, which is going to be really interesting. It follows Korean folklore, and it's got a lot of romance, I've heard, and I'm very excited to read it. This one I'm going to be using for the challenge of reading a book featuring an Asian protagonist. Kat Cho herself is also Korean, and it follows Korean mythology with Korean characters, so this is going to be my first pick for Asian Readathon. Next up, I'm going to be reading Thorn by Intizar Kanani. This is a YA fantasy retelling again as well, but this one is a retelling of the Swan Princess, I believe. I'm super excited to read this. I've had this on my list for far too long. I desperately need to actually read it. But this one I am using to fulfill the prompt for reading a book written by an Asian author from my favorite genre, and this is fantasy and it's a retelling, which is my absolute favorite genre. So it's gonna be perfect. Intizar as well is of Pakistani ethnicity, so I am super pumped to read this for Asian Readathon. Next up is my first double read, kind of. The next book that I'm going to be reading is Bird's Art Life by Keo McClare. This is a nonfiction memoir detailing Kaya's life as she tries to come to terms with her identity and her career as a writer and her relationship with the natural world around her. I read this for a class called Writing Land and Place that I took over the summer last year and absolutely adored, so this is a reread. But I'm reading this for a book written by a Asian author that is nonfiction. Kyo is a Japanese-Canadian author, and again, I just love this so much, so I'm so excited to read it. This brings up a great segue into the the second readathon that I'm going to be participating in during the month of May, and that is the pop culture readathon. The second mini round of the year is going on during the month of May. It takes place during the last 2 weeks, from the 16th to the 31st. It's hosted by It's With Me, and I will leave her links down below, as well as the link to the Pop Culture-a-thon Twitter account. This one's Degrassi themed, and I'm so excited. I love Degrassi. My little Canadian heart is so happy. But basically this is a readathon that focuses on many different aspects of pop culture, specifically 90s pop culture, so this one is super exciting. I'm following the prompt card that follows specific characters and has prompts related to them. But this is the first book that I'm going to be reading for 2 readathons. For Pop Culture Readathon, this one is going to fulfill the prompt for a book about social activism, which I'm super excited to read. Next up, I'm going to be reading Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. This one was a gift from Kayla over at I Love Books Okay, so I will leave her links down below. I'm super excited to read this. It's been on my TBR since I got it from Kayla, so this is a high fantasy adult novel following rebels and empires and destruction of empires, and I don't know a whole lot else about it, but I'm very excited. Ken Liu is a Chinese author, and I'm going to be reading this for Asian Readathon as reading a book written by an Asian author. And then I'm also going to be reading it for the Pop Culture Readathon as the bonus book, which is reading a book by an author that is new to you, who Ken Liu is definitely new to me. I've never read any of his books, so I'm very excited to read this. Next up is my last book for the Asian Readathon, and that is going to be The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. Roshni Chokshi is an Indian and Filipino writer, and The Gilded Wolves is one of the books I've had on my shelf for the longest time, and one that I've been looking forward to reading for so long. This tells the story of a huge group of found family characters trying to pull off a heist in the early 1800s? Late 1800s, 1889, and it is set in Paris. This I am using for Asian Readathon because it fulfills the prompt of reading a book by a Asian author that is not US centric. This one is set in Paris, so I'm very excited about that. And I'm also using it for Pop Culture Readathon as reading a book with disability rep, because I know that one, if not more than one of these characters is disabled in some way, so again, very excited to read this. Moving on to the other books that I'm going to be reading for the Pop Culture Readathon. The first book is Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. This is an adult romance book following 2 characters. What are their names? Sam and Tate. When they were teenagers, they both ended up on a trip to New York City with their respective families, and they ended up falling in love in a whirlwind 2-week adventure. Sam herself is a childhood actress. She's a celebrity. Her family is very well known, and she ends up telling Tate her identity, and he ends up breaking her trust and revealing who she is. Years later, they are reunited, and it's kind of an enemies to lovers thing after that. But this is going to fulfill the prompt of reading a book with a celebrity romance. So again, I'm very excited. I started reading this book a little while ago. I just got into like the first chapter, so I'm excited to revisit it. It's going to be my first Christina Lauren book, which is kind of exciting in the adult romance world. Next up, to fulfill the prompt of reading a book that is going to make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, I'm going to be reading You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is a YA contemporary, which is something I don't normally read, but I've been very excited to read it. This tells the story of Liz, who is determined to make it in the world of high school and science, but she always finds that she is unable to shine in the tiny town that she lives in. She finds that she's too poor, she's too black, and she's too awkward to shine. However, Liz's financial aid kind of falls through after she's been planning to go to this prestigious college on a music scholarship in order to become a doctor. So because her financial aid is dried up, she ends up having to try and win the title of prom queen in order to regain a scholarship to go to school. This is a female-female romance, which is something I'm always excited for, especially in YA, and it's something that I've heard amazing reviews about, and I'm very excited to read it. Next up is a book that my boyfriend Tyler has been wanting me to read for a long time, and it's probably the book that's been on my TBR for the longest. But it's something that I am very excited to read, and I can't believe I haven't read it yet. But that is The Last Witch, which is the prequel series to the Witcher series. I'm sure you've heard of The Witcher. One of the best TV shows I've ever watched on Netflix. Second season is coming soon, which I'm very excited. But these are the prequel novellas that set up the world of The Witcher. This I'm going to be using for the Pop Culture Readathon because it is a book with multiple covers. There is like 3 or 4 different types of covers for this book. I happen to have the one that's got the ugly Netflix logo, but what are you gonna do? But this is, again, a set of novellas that kind of builds up Geralt's character and introduces you to the world of The Witcher, which I am very excited to read, and it is going to be the last book that I read for Pop Culture Readathon. Finally, the last readathon that is going on in May is running from the 24th to the 31st, the last week in May, and that is the Do-the-thing-a-thon, which is hosted by Ashley, and I will leave her links down below. This readathon is super open in terms of its prompts and its challenges. It's basically just a way to encourage you to, as Ashley puts it, do the thing. Do the thing that you've been wanting to do for a long time. Finish some of your goals, reach some of your goals before the midpoint of the year. Some of the challenges that I wrote down, there's like a few optional ones that she gave out as kind of examples, and then there are these optional prompts that she has posted for this readathon. There's one that's reading outside your usual genre, reading for an hour a day, reading 50 pages a day, continuing a series, reading the oldest book on your TBR, and I myself have added in, I want to be halfway through my Goodreads goal. I just realized now as I'm looking at this, I can cross off another challenge with a different book, so I'm actually going to read this book during the last week of May with my Do-the-thing-a-thon books. And that is You Should See Me in a Crown, because it's a book that's not my usual genre. I don't really read YA contemporary, so hey, that works. Moving on, here are the other 2 books that I'm planning on reading during that last week. Keeping it kind of simple, but still fulfilling my challenges. The first book that I'm going to read is Return of the Thief by Megan Whalen Turner. This is the 6th and final book in the Queen's Thief series, which is one of my absolute favorite historical fantasy series. It follows Jen, who is a amazing thief in this Greco-Roman historical fantasy setting. He is a thief who has bragged about his prowess for far too long and ends up being challenged by the king in the certain world that he's being imprisoned in order to find this relic magical object that will bring magic back to the kingdom, or else die. So, you know, it's kind of a lot of incentive, but it ends up being one of my favorite series of all time, and this is the last book. So this is going to be something that I'm using to reach one of my goals for the year, which is to get all these sequels off of my TBR and to finish as many series as I can. I finished 2 other series earlier on in the year, so this will be the 3rd series that I have completely finished off my TBR, and I'm very excited to read it. And finally, the last book that I want to read in May is another book written by an Asian author, which I'm very excited about, and that is The Soul of the Sword by Julie Kagawa. This is the 2nd book in the Shadow of the Fox series. Julie Kagawa, again, is another Canadian-Japanese author, and Shadow of the Fox was one of my favorite reads of a couple of years ago. I don't remember if I read it in 2018 or 2019, but one of my favorite books ever, and this is the sequel, so I'm going to be using this to continue the series, which is another prompt for the Do-the-thing-a-thon. This series follows Yumeko, who is a kitsune shapeshifter, fox shapeshifter, who ends up getting pulled into this entire whirlwind of events where she has to try and save her family, save her country, basically, from an evil force that has been released from this, as you can guess, a sword. I haven't read the series in a while, so I'm kind of rusty on the intricacies of the plot, but I remember that the characters were some of my favorite characters I've ever read about, and the series was so compelling, so I'm very excited to get this off of my TBR and to pick up and read the final book in the trilogy after this is done, but I'm very excited. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you are new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish and writing videos every week. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up because it really supports my channel, and leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you have read or are planning on reading any of the books I mentioned here, or if you are planning on participating in any of the readathons mentioned. Again, all of the links for all the readathons will be left down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye-bye.